Okay, welcome back then. Yeah, early September 1860, which is exactly where we left off, and I had committed to kind of returning to this place really, just to provide a bit of an appraisal on the war, to kind of think out a little bit of our strategy. I hate to use the phrase going forward, I find it upsetting, but going forward. And I mean, what a summer it's been. I think, you know, looking at the action in Northern Bulgaria, the violence has been so intense, you know, like that. I mean, we've probably inflicted more, if not the same amount of casualties in the last 4 months alone on any given opponent than probably in the two previous wars combined. You know, put it that way, it's been something else. And as someone kind of pointed out in one of the comments, you know, comparisons to the First World War abound, and astutely so. And I think in the 1860s that certainly is the case. You can see in the American Civil War in real life, you know, explosive shells, trench warfare often characterized by sieges. You still have traditional Napoleonic pitched battles a la Gettysburg and Chancellorsville and all this sort of thing. But certainly there are, you know, there are sort of signs of things to come, music of the future, etc. And we're experiencing that ourselves, you know, very much so. It's still an era where individual leadership, I think, can make a difference. We have, obviously, Mushyoma Pasha as a kind of star leader, and you can see this in other wars. Again, in the American Civil War, you have these sort of famous people like General Lee, I suppose, with a smaller and probably qualitatively inferior army, somewhat ragtag, able to deliver astonishing results on the basis of maneuver and effective leadership. And we're experiencing that ourselves still, but certainly, yeah, there are signs of things to come. On the kind of western part of the front then, really, or the eastern part of the front, I should say, actually, from, say, Constanta to Plevna, the Austrians are still very much in place. They're you know, they're dug in like kind of ticks, and but they have been heavily attritioned. They haven't yet taken Plevna. They have attempted to assault it, and they have inflicted heavy casualties. And I think the days are numbered on Plevna. We didn't invest much into Plevna. We did invest a bit more into Constanta. Now, one thing that someone was asking about in the comments is whether or not kind of fortifications have a long-term cost. I think they do, but that it's mild, that you're essentially paying for the upkeep of the kind of men as opposed to the structures themselves. The structures are fairly solid. Initial structures are kind of early modern sort of structures, and in 1850, when this game begins, they're actually pretty effective. I mean, that's what we had at Plevna. Remember the endless assaults on Plevna by the Russians? And that had a really small garrison. It was an early modern fortress, and it was able to kind of inflict, you know, pretty heavy casualties, 60,000 casualties odd, which at that time seemed like a lot, on the Russians during their repeated attempts to kind of take Plevna. I mean, these kind of fortresses now, that's what we had at Sarajevo. They're just not enough, really. They need to be expanded, and they need a full-time garrison as well. Not just a garrison that musters like this one on the basis of, you know, like the... Actually, we did have a couple of full-time divisions in here. I think we have 3 fortress divisions in Constanta. The others are kind of mustered. But, for example, in Adrianople is actually the site of one of a few modern industrial forts. We start in 1850 with a permanent garrison, which will be complemented by a larger force, which is mustered in the event of a siege. That's also the case with Constantinople, which also is the site of a large modern industrial fortress. Very early on, we invested on upgrading these, because it was one of the earlier videos before the Crimean War, because this is the center of power, really. It's absolutely, you know, sort of paramount that these areas can be held against, you know, possibly surprise heavy assaults. But what we do need to do is with our other fortresses like Sofia, with Salonika, these are both being enlarged. Can I get an industrial view? So we've got a fort extension happening in Salonika, and the same also in Sofia. Once they're extended to include larger parts of the city, these forts will then be upgraded. That is quite costly and time-consuming in and of itself. You know, it eats into a lot of state revenue, takes a lot of manufactured goods, so it is an expensive process. And with limited resources, it's a toss-up between doing that and having a large field army. Now, in real life, the Ottomans did really well in the Crimean War. The Crimean War kind of, you know, really demonstrated the kind of efficacy of the kind of Nezim el-Shadid, the new model army, which had existed in an embryonic and experimental sort of way, even in the 18th century, but with the destruction of the Janissaries, had become really the template around which a new army was built entirely. And that's the army that we inherited in 1850. That's the army that is used in the real Crimean War, and the army that we use now. And it was very effective. It defeated the Russians in the field. And when the British and French landed in Salonika, the Russians had been defeated really already. But public pressure in Britain and France, because of the cost, the expense of what they've done, meant that they then actually launched an additional expedition to the Crimea. But initially their intervention was to really support the Ottomans, but they did very well. In 1877, however, in real life, they were defeated really, really badly by Russia. One of the main reasons for that is because the Ottomans had drawn the wrong conclusions about the nature of modern warfare. They thought that, the nature of modern warfare is purely attritional. It's based around really large fortresses and this kind of thing. So the Ottoman state invested massive amounts. First of all, in expanding the navy, because this was a pet project of Abdulaziz, the monarch, for most of the 1860s. But also fortresses, Plevna and places like this were turned into massive modern fortresses with really large garrisons. Problem is, they didn't have much of a field command to be able to support these fortresses, so the Russians just kind of knocked them off one at a time. It took them a long time sometimes, not really in the greater scheme of things, but they took a lot of casualties. They really struggled to take Plevna. But once that had been done, it opened the way into Adrianople. I think they even took Adrianople. And then threatened Constantinople, and then I think that Britain intervened, sent its fleet into the Bosporus, and that was enough to kind of convince them that they had done enough, But 1877 demonstrated the Ottomans had drawn the wrong conclusion and had gone too heavily the other way. That they looked at the American Civil War and thought, okay, yeah, it's about kind of fortresses and this sort of thing. So we have to kind of balance. We're trying to maintain a balance between fortifying areas where we can really get a lot of benefit. And we have to see fortresses as really, for the most part, delaying actions. You can't conduct an offensive at a fortress. You might be able to inflict heavy casualties, but we need a really, really kind of robust field army to exploit that. If they launch a big offensive as they have against Plevna, look, they've taken losses here. We now have a good field army in place to kind of make the most of that situation to counterattack. So that's what we do. We are taking a balanced approach. We do have probably more resources at our disposal than the Ottomans really had by 1860, because we've, really focused on a kind of rational and rapid kind of industrialization of the Ottoman Empire, focusing initially on expanding the agricultural base, utilizing cash crops for export to provide us with the liquidity, which in turn we can then invest into industrial plants. So in 10 years, we've made incredible headway. The industrialization of the Ottoman Empire is rapid, and I'm about to sneeze. And also railroads. Oh, excuse me. Oh, blimey. But, we have railroads connecting Constantinople right up to kind of Kars. I'd be interested to know when the first railroad... I bet it wouldn't have been in the 1860s. I bet it would have been in the last decade of the 19th century, maybe even the beginning of the 20th century. The kind of famous Orient Express, which was heavily kind of financed by the Prussians, was really built in when? 1880s, 1890s, that connected kind of Baghdad. Baghdad's going to be connected well before then to Constantinople. So, food for thought. And with that, we have a large, demographic expansion on the back of focused industrialization, which we're also kind of is also paying dividends. In terms of the number of officers and men that we can draw, so we could field a slightly larger field army than the Ottomans could really field. We have more resources at our disposal. The larger economy means more transactions, more exports. That means more private revenue, but we have a fairly protectionist tax system set up. Our tariff taxes are set at 40%. That's pretty high. That means that anything that's exported or imported, we take 40% on that. The state does. That's really intentional. The downside of that is it does put pressure on our foreign relations. Other powers don't like it, especially free market powers like Britain, the United States. We're trying to offset that with regular gestures to Britain. We had a high watermark of relations with Britain during the Crimean War, and we're trying as much as we can to bolster that. We have a commerce agreement, long-standing commerce agreement with Britain, which we managed to achieve, and that should hold our relations reasonably high. So we would, in theory, Britain prioritizes us, among other powers they have commerce agreements with, which means that we're always going to have slightly more exports than we normally would have, because if Britain's looking for something like tobacco, unless they have a commerce agreement with the USA as well, which to be frank they probably do, they're likely to prioritize us. If they're in a position to, they will import tobacco from us over the United States. Yes, they also have a commerce agreement with the United States, which kind of mitigates that somewhat. But anyway, you get the idea. Certain kinds of things that the Americans might not be exporting, or maybe there's a shortage. What happens if, and I'm sure there's a possibility that there could be, there is an American Civil War, there's secessionist noises in the South, there's economic chaos. If the tobacco-growing heartland of America is controlled by the Confederate States, which is kind of a minor power with serious legitimacy issues, and they become, one of the biggest tobacco kind of export as well, we're probably going to be higher in the pecking order than the Confederate States. We're a major power. We've got a lot of prestige. Prestige is not an amorphous thing. It determines all kinds of important things. The more prestige you have, the easier it is to do certain kinds of things in this game, and that's quite good. It's not an abstract score. It affects a lot of things. But if during the American Civil War, we might end up being, front runners in terms of the pecking order as a tobacco exporting power. Now, probably tobacco exports now, because of the amount of industrial plant that we have, is increasingly going to be more and more of a marginal part of our economy. But it's still important. It was a really important part of our early industrial development and was a part of a plan. We had a kind of thought-out plan for that. But anyway, so during the American Civil War, we could really benefit from that. Cotton and tobacco are two things that we have in abundance that we could be looking at exporting. We can't really export any more tobacco, actually, than we already are, frankly. We pretty much export everything that we have spare, so it doesn't matter too much. But cotton would be good, certainly. So the plan, anyway, militarily, we have a relook through the reports to remind ourselves. So, yeah, the Austrians have taken Bosnia-Herzegovina, or Sarajevo, really, the capital. And we can see from that they have a force of about 230,000. Probably more than that. They have additional army corps, probably about 300,000. So we're going to be looking at a fairly sizable fight in the west, and we do need to now begin to prepare forces to move west, because these forces are going to start flooding into Niš, Kosovo, and destabilizing the situation in the west. But first of all, we need to settle the situation here. So we're doing that. We've got Hussein Avni, so that's Omar Pasha. We've got Hussein Avni Pasha set to an offensive posture. His forces in pretty good shape. He's going to be pressing into Plevna with the support of adjacent forces. Austrian reserves seem to have gone walkies. We don't know where they are. We had kind of optics on fairly substantial Austrian forces in the north bank of the Danube. They might be they might be kind of hidden away. We can see there are also some forces inside Bucharest, which is now a former Austrian province. We intend to take that at some point, hopefully. But yeah, we need to now begin relieving the pressure, re-securing the south bank of the Danube, and using that really then to kind of free up forces. Because we're able to defend the line easier on the basis of it being a river, large river. Avdi Pasha and Hussein Avni are going to be earmarked, I think, for a move west. So at some point we're going to move Avdi Pasha to Niš. He'll be supported by Omar Pasha. Omar Pasha and Avdi Pasha are going to be earmarked for a move west towards Niš. Avdi Pasha is going to stay here for the time being. There are forces that have made it, so the kind of Sofia, they've kind of pushed through from Plevna. That force is going to be engaged by Avdi Pasha, and we're going to be clearing that force out, and then their escape route is going to be kind of nailed, hopefully by Hussein Avni as he moves into Plevna. Supported by Avdi Pasha on the right, and we've got Rita Pasha's 5th Army in the south. That 5th Army is now being reinforced with remaining elements that it needs, really, to be a fully fledged standing army. So artillery battery, independent artillery regiments, a cavalry division, and we do need an additional cavalry division at some point. I think we've got the manpower. I think we may even have it in construction, and it's slipped my memory. Let's have a look through. So we've got supply wagons. Yeah, okay. So we need an additional cavalry division for Avdi Pasha's force. I thought we had it in construction. Let's have a quick check. So we've got siege guns in Adrianople, the arsenal. We had a plan to turn Adrianople into a large arsenal. The reality is we actually need more firepower in a lot of our commands. So it's going to be a while before we're able to stockpile guns in Adrianople. But we are going to start beginning a kind of production run of guns. 14. Yeah, it's time then to begin the 2nd Cavalry Division. That's going to be earmarked for Avdi Pasha's force. And we'll begin constructing that in, I guess, it doesn't matter too much, but we'll go with Ankara. Okay. That's it. The rest of the moves we've kind of already made, actually. We've got our forces in place. They're all set to kind of hold at all costs. Omar Pasha's engaged in a couple of sizable actions, so his force does need time to rest and recuperate. because of actions like this. This is considered a really significant. We get 2 national morale points for this. Austrian losses are light, but we take 14,000 casualties, and it looks like obviously this is coming from what is probably an entire army corps that's been destroyed here. So that's really good to see. So yeah, considered a sizable victory, but this has taken a toll on Omar Pasha, who has been engaged in various actions as a follow-up action there. Destroys another 7 elements, mostly prisoners. So it shows that Austrian morale is beginning to falter. There's an action on the right of Varna. 30,000 casualties inflicted, 12,000 taken. And that's Abdulkarim Nadir. Another action yet again in Agosta. Omar Pasha. So he engages in 3 battles, really, all of which are highly successful, So, yeah, his force needs just some time to rest, recuperate, reorganize itself. Yeah, and Avni Pasha engages in additional action in Agosta, which is also successful. So, yeah, lively round, and at the end of a lively summer, really, early September. The war season is coming to an end. That will reduce mobility. That will hopefully slow down the Austrian forces in Bosnia. And we'll check through the rest of the reports really quickly, make sure there's nothing important that's missed. Replacements are flooding out, that's good. 8. Let's check our war ministry. Okay, so we need some heavy warship replacements. We do have the revenue. It's going to cost us 2 prestige points. Officers, yeah, okay, we've got the resources for that, so let's go ahead and do that. And we need to do also light warships. That's fine. That's good. That still leaves us with sufficient manufactured goods and such. Yeah, on the surface of it, a tough round, and when we lose Sarajevo, also, we had a foul up in Yemen with the loss of Sana. So on the surface, it is a bad round. We don't really lose any national morale points from it. I mean, we lose 1 from war weariness, but gain 2 from battles. But yeah, we've retaken Sana actually, which is good. We should be clearing this area out in the next fortnight. But then we have the initial expense of once again. I think Sana is maybe a site for a modern fortress, because it just keeps kind of falling. All right, let's just check our economy. I think we might have set our kind of exports and stuff. No, we didn't. Glad I checked it. We're going to keep tight on manufactured goods, I think, for the time being, because we just need them for the war effort. And that's another way that the economy is slowed down and affected on the basis of warfare, of course, is that certain kinds of commodities which you would export, which you get nice private revenue for, that doesn't happen because you're kind of the states using it, Right, that's all okay. Let's have a look. Let's try and attempt another state visit to the UK, I think. I think also to France. Right. Assets balance is good. Average satisfaction is going up. One thing that occurred to me, I've been looking at our economy the last couple of months thinking, gosh, you wouldn't think that we're in the midst of an economic crisis. Export seems up. And then it occurred to me, actually, after the last video. Well, total number of manufactured goods, or goods actually sold, is up. But the yield is a little bit deceptive, of course, because of inflation. This whole time, or the last couple of months at least, I wasn't taking into account inflation. Thinking, my God, 535, that's great, but that's with 5% inflation, which obviously impacts our purchasing power. So everything's a bit more expensive. We shouldn't get too heady about that. But total number of goods, that's really good to see, to tell you the truth. Yeah, we're seeing a dramatic increase in the size of our economy. Exports are decent as well. 81 units of manufactured goods, 339. The economy looks okay. It doesn't look in bad shape, save for inflation. We're going to check our regional census. One thing we are keeping an eye on is any kind of delayed impact on. So it's mostly contented with popular satisfaction in Izmit and Smyrna. Militancy growing in obviously the kind of areas of industrial development, as to be expected. Yeah, and growth obviously principally focused also in areas of significant development. Okay, I think that's going to be it. Yeah, economy looks like to be in good shape. So that's just one of Austria's vassals declaring one of the Papal States, which is completely occupied by Austria for the time being. China also. Let's send another state visit to China. I want to keep kind of pestering them, you know. Sometimes if you kind of pester them a little bit, they sort of... China's not in Africa, is it? See, promise local support would be... But it's very dangerous to do that with China. I don't think we're going to be doing that with China. We'll propose another state visit. It doesn't always, but sometimes a little bit of diplomatic hassling pays off, you know. They kind of think, you know, they sort of... one particular turn they may not consider it. They're not, you know, they might think, okay, let's receive them and see what they want. Okay. Let's quickly check the Gulf states as well. British are becoming a bit of an irritant here. Let's see what colonial options we have. Nothing really. I think what we want to do is to kind of... we don't have much in the way of officers, though. That's the problem, and it requires one officer conscripts manufacture goods. Not yet, but we do want to pacify this region a little bit. Go with gunboat diplomacy. Try to frighten the natives in Q8. We want to try and get that up to 50% colonial penetration, really. Okay, let's check. Now, we do have a merchant fleet, which is near completion, I think. Yeah, it's... That's a clipper fleet, so it's good for long range. It's pure age of sail. The good thing about our merchant fleet is that it's large, but it's pure age of sail, and it's comprised of a lot of clippers, which are quite expensive, but they don't take coal. The real problem with merchant fleets later on is they eat a lot of coal, and we don't have a huge amount of domestic access to coal. You know, I mean, we're still not self-sufficient in coal, and we've exploited large parts of you know the coal reserves that we have. Let's check on that really quickly. We've got 2 coal mines now in Niche and Railway, 30 days away from completion. The hope is that this won't be interfered with too much by the war. We want to re-secure Niche, really. Then we've got a coal mine being built in Kosovo. Probably the next thing is a stretch of rail line down to Kosovo. We'll make sure that we've got the military assets in place there to provide security for that kind of development. Okay, going to put you on pause and pass turn, and we'll see you in late September. Okay, welcome back then, late September, and yeah, it's been another absolutely titanic round of battles in Northern Bulgaria. In this round alone, we get 6 national morale points just from battles, -1 from war weariness, and we get 64 prestige from battles. So the other great powers are kind of very much taking notice of what's happening. So have a look at the reports. Now, first of all, in terms of the kind of historical flavour stuff, there is a frigate order that's been sent to Britain. It's quite interesting, and we'll have a look at what we get from that, how much it costs us, and it's an order that's been sent. It might be a script. I mean, well, it is a scripted event. Hopefully, it will have kind of positive effect on relations with Britain. We'll keep an eye on that as well. But yeah, we'll see what happens from that. Hopefully, we'll get some sort of naval ships, and I guess it will cost us a bit of money, but. That's good. That's a reflection of the kind of good standing that we have with the UK at this time. Now down to the action. Okay, well the first engagement is an Austrian attempt to take Plevna, which it looks like they almost do. They take 10,000 casualties, take 6,400 prisoners, and we lose 8,000. So I mean, it looks like they pretty much virtually take it. That's the first engagement anyway. We don't lose any national morale points from it. I'm not sure if it might have been that there was just a very small force still there that was regenerating, kind of generic garrison forces that were receiving replacements as they sustained losses and as some of them surrendered. The other action then is obviously a peripheral kind of colonial affair. We pretty much clear the area around Sana, happy with that. So Zerfman's stuff is going to sit tight there for the time being. The cavalry division Pace is also going to sit tight. And Zerfman's stuff in any case is not activated. But once again, we have the western part of the territory cleared. I guess for how long, we don't know. Probably not very long in our experience. Now, the first big engagement is actually... Now, this force, I think what this force is the force that was around Sofia, because Abdi Pasha doesn't engage anything. So I think that force is trying to fall back into Agosta and is engaged by Omar Pasha. And as a success, I mean, it's... It looks like this force was probably set to fall back or avoid any kind of major action. It was a partially isolated force. It was isolated once Hussein Avni moved into Plevna, but of a force of 37,000, we inflict 3,100 casualties and we take 2,000 in return. So a fairly small action, actually. But that's really just the beginning. The next big action then is Hussein Avni arriving in Plevna with a view to lift the siege at Plevna. Now, there's a lot of supporting Austrian forces, and we have pretty much our entire field command supporting him. It's 3 national morale points. And a story of overwhelming success. So we can see here that this is the size of our entire field command, I believe. Just under 500,000 men. 63,000 horses, 2,142 guns. We lose 5,000 men. We inflict 20,000 casualties, but destroy many, many elements. Entire regiments are destroyed. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Take 25,000 prisoners. And that is 3 national morale points from that battle. That is seen as an absolute rout on the part of the Austrian forces. What we're seeing now is initially they were falling back in good order. I think as they sustain losses, their morale is eroded, their organisation and cohesion is chipped away at. These battles are now beginning to sort of have a much bigger effect on the Austrians. The Austrian initially overwhelming presence of the Danube is being whittled away. And, yeah, very good to see. An absolute rout. That's not it. So we can see the Austrians fail to retreat from that battle. There is an additional engagement at Plevna. They try and pull back. And this time, I don't know why Hussein Avni is in command of the action. Not entirely clear why that's the case. But anyway, it's an overwhelming victory. We do suffer heavier casualties this time, 23,000. We inflict 68,000. Destroy 6 elements, and we take just under 10,000 prisoners. Again, 2 national morale points from that. Just a story of overwhelming success. Really, really good to see. And initially, I mean, when this all kind of kicked off on the eastern part of the line, really, here, when we still had, like, a lot of our kind of teeth arms in sort of Bosnia, there was a fleeting moment of futility where I thought, good God, they have so much here. We're going to be able to stop them, or we're going to be like losing Adrianople and Constantinople. I really thought that could be on the cards. It was a fleeting moment, but then I thought, look, sense of proportion. We've got 500,000 men. We've just got to get our pieces in place, whittle them down, and that's beginning to pay off. The last big action then is an additional battle with Omar Pasha. I think this is as he is moving from... Well, it can't be. No, I think he's just the theatre commander. So this is probably why, in a confusing way, Hussein Avni takes command of the area that Omar Pasha is in. And he is in turn providing command to Hussein Avni's forces. Pretty confused, but that's okay. It's paying off in the last analysis. 41,000 casualties, 3 elements destroyed, 4,800 prisoners. So just staggering defeats for the Austrians. Now, they had a lot of national morale to trade on. And they are at 131, and we're at 114. We are closing the gap. You know, they had a big lead. They started the war nationally very animated, based on the success, I suppose, of imposing a hefty defeat on Piedmont, Sardinia, taking the Italian peninsula, occupying Romania, and they traded a lot of that also to organise what looks like a kind of massive national mobilisation. I wonder how long they can sustain this. One of the things with the injured economy that they have, you know, fatally wounded economy, is it will be hard for them to replace these losses. It costs state revenue, it costs manufactured goods and things like that. So, you know, we'll see what kind of impact long term this is going to have on the Austrians. It might be that long term, even though they're able to field this massive army, that it's, you know, it is just going to be a force that gradually atrophies. But militarily, outstanding round. Really, really happy with that. And before we move on, let's make our military moves actually. So we're going to set Omar Pasha's going to stay in Agosta. Let's set Hussein Avni to a defensive posture. What we need to do now is to get our forces in a configuration on the right so that they can support each other sufficiently. I think Hussein Avni is ultimately going to press from Plevna up to Constanta to lift the siege there and secure the last part of the southern bank of the Danube. Now this position, I mean, it can be attacked from Moldova, but there are still large reserve forces. I'm half tempted, the problem is we don't have any supporting forces, to press an offensive into Wallachia to try and siege Bucharest. Not yet, but that could be on the cards. And if we did that, there's large forces inside Bucharest, inside the fortress, I think. A lot of damaged army corps that are receiving replacements. It looks like Schwarzenberg, who's the guy that we engaged actually in Plevna, has fallen back there. So we've got a very damaged, heavily attritioned Austrian forces have fallen back. But they do have a large reserve there. And their reserves once again are making an appearance. So I think that maybe they were there all along, but we couldn't see them. We are starting to see rain now, starting to see some heavy weather, autumn weather beginning to kind of appear in northern Bulgaria. So this is going to slow down movement. But I think what we're going to do, get Abdul Karim Nadir to join up with Hussein Avni, not literally fuse the forces because they'd have a command penalty, but to take a position in Plevna. That's a 10-day march. And we're going to get Rita Pasha, 7 days, to move up to Varna. That will give us a configuration of 3 forces, about 300,000 men, to then conduct an offensive up towards Constanta. Hopefully we'll use Hussein Avni as the spearhead of that force. That's why we're keeping him in position to get as much rest as possible, get replacements, and yeah, then launch an offensive up towards Constanta. Hopefully we'll have enough time. The structure is partially breached, but it still provides some defensive benefit. And let's not forget we have a force of 72,000 garrison there, so we need really a month, maybe 6 weeks to kind of prepare for an offensive up there. And then once that's done, I guess, you know, we could be looking at Wallachia. The other option, of course, is that we just press on and besiege Wallachia, try and trap that Austrian force there. But we've had experiences of trapping forces before, and also if they, you know, if they take Constanta, they take a depot, so it's kind of sort of pissing in the wind, really, isn't it? So maybe not. I think we'll look to clear Constanta then in good order, with 3 forces that are kind of fully, they've got their replacements, they've got supplies, they're in good order, they can press up across, because that is going to be a hard action. We're going to be crossing a big river, engaging a large field command with likely substantial reserve forces in this area. So, yeah, we need to be in good shape for that. The time is now. We're going to keep Omar Pasha in place for the time being in Agosta, where he can support Abdi Pasha, but Abdi Pasha is now going to conduct an offensive. Weather in Sofia is not good. It's raining in Niš as well, so autumn weather really is going to limit his movement. But Abdi Pasha's force probably is in the best shape. He doesn't have a cavalry detachment yet, but we're going to have to just live with that. He will receive support from Omar Pasha. Let's move to Niš. That's 10 days, and I think we'll halt there. We'll look to kind of liberate the area around Niš, destroy this force, and then maybe ultimately look to kind of conduct some kind of sortie into Bosnia. We'll see what happens. We'll have a look. And a lot of it is kind of contingent to Austrian moves. So that's pretty much combat. I think the other thing we are going to do, actually, never forget the fleet, is we're going to detach now. See, there aren't any Austrian forces. These Austrian raiders took some fairly hefty losses in the maritime trade box. We're going to move the main fleet back. Oh no, we want the commander to be commander fleet, don't we? Here we go. Yeah, let's move the main fleet back then to Constantinople. Probably in rather dubious weather, bleak weathers, but we'll set him to engage en route anything that he might come across. 14 days, if he makes it on time. And let's get the raiding fleet. We're going to keep the raiding fleet in place for now because they need some time actually to kind of repair damage on the ships. So even though they're in pretty good condition, we're going to hold tight for the time being. Okay. Now we did capture the HQ units of a couple of Austrian corps and we've received massive amounts of prisoners. So we're going to be looking to construct 2 reserve army corps. That will be comprised of, I don't know, Croats, Hungarians, some ethnic, whatever ethnic group has some kind of gripe with Vienna from the prisoners that we've received. And we're going to keep them tight in Plevna, actually, because Plevna is a little bit weak as a fortress at the moment. So yeah, we're going to keep them tight in Plevna, and they will constitute a garrison, really, an enlarged garrison. Okay, we've got signals department, and that goes into wigwag signaling. It's a naval development. Right, let's check the economy quick. Now we've got a lot of private capital stored and manufactured goods, so we are going to be looking at sort of bit of industrial development at increased cost with like 5% inflation. I'm going to stop exporting steel, I think, now. Did we actually export any steel last term? We sold fruits, textiles, dyes, tobacco, chemicals, wool and cotton. I'm looking forward to that to bump up in the event of trouble in America. And trouble is brewing in America. Because we've got a lot of cotton and wool. Dyes, we need dyes. $133 on the domestic market for 508 private capital, nice. 80 exported for 299. Imports 30 merchandises for 60. So nice trade balance, and yeah, really strong kind of sort of private revenue returns. Okay. I think we're going to look at a luxury goods factory. The reason being is it's something that's selling really well on the domestic market, and we want to start looking to export that. And we do produce enough manufactured goods that they would essentially convert, a portion of those will convert into luxury goods shops. It's kind of how it works, really. It's sort of on the basis of conversion. It is one of the more expensive things to build in terms of manufactured goods. It doesn't leave us with a lot left. But then we're always going to be confronted with that same kind of or do we just build another merchant fleet, which is eats into some of the private capital we've got, but not manufactured goods? We need to build up manufactured goods. Or do we just look at something that's going to... Everything's rather expensive, of course, because of inflation. I'm kind of noticing that. The thing with wool farms is with railroads at 100% efficiency, we also get cattle. Probably we have so much wool at the moment, we just can't sell the stuff, you know. And that's the problem. The British in India and like the United States sells so much cotton and wool that the market's kind of saturated. Do we just begin the next coal mine in Petric? That'd make a lot of sense. It doesn't eat into our manufactured goods, which is something that we need for military matters. It's reinvesting some private capital into something that we need. Let's do it. That's all the coal mines that we can actually build, really, until we retake Bihac up here. we do need to think about railroads to connect up Petric and also ultimately Kosovo, which is going to be expensive because it's quite tough old terrain. This fairly mountainous, fairly hilly, and yeah, once we get certain kinds of technologies, nitroglycerine and stuff like that, that'll change. But anyway, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, 7 days, 10. Riza Pasha's army now has received a cavalry division and all the various kind of things needed for it to constitute a proper field command now. 90,000 men. What we do need to do is to now begin a construction run. We've got a cavalry division being built in Ankara. We need to build a construction run every single turn, because we get 5 officers per turn, or 6 at the moment. After discharges and replacements and such, we get 6 per turn, and this is 4. So we can build 1 every single turn and continuously do that. And we need more firepower and begin to pad out our field commands. Yeah, we'll do that. That's pretty much it, I think. I don't think there's anything else that we're going to be looking at doing. I think the one thing we will consider now is we have a lot of state revenue, not really the manpower for any really massive expansion of the army for some time. So we want the state revenue to be used for something worthwhile. We did have a long-term project of investing in, I think it was, let's have a look, muzzle-loaded rifles. So we're going to be sticking 50 per fortnight into muzzle-loaded rifles, and that's an important qualitative leap for us. And something that I suspect the Austrians already have, which is what accounts for their high combat value of their forces. I think they have the high firepower, and more so than we, which is why we need guns and why we need kind of longer range small arms, basically. I think the battles that we're winning principally on the basis of melee, aggression, this kind of thing, closing with them, especially with our Imperial Guard forces. So anyway, that's pretty much it. We'll check our assets balance, make sure that we meet demand for everything, and we are. National satisfaction just dropped. Let's check our census, make sure there's no industrial action, nothing upsetting or worrying happening. No, everything seems to be okay. We're going to send troops to quell local unrest. That costs 50, but that reduces militancy in certain kinds of areas. We need to really be doing that at least once a year. So, yeah, I'm going to put you on pause past turn. We're in late September, so I will see you in early October. Okay, welcome back. With past turn, then it's early October, and pretty quiet round, actually. I mean, especially compared to what we've seen. In fact, no significant engagements. While besieging, this is quite interesting. While besieging this fortress, we actually managed to repair it. So we've conducted some repairs, although it's still partially breached. I don't know what the basis for that. Usually, I think it's laboured attachments. I think I incorrectly said an engineered attachment in a previous video, but laboured attachments, maybe engineers also, do conduct repairs on fortresses. Now, there are no laboured attachments in the fortress, but perhaps it's something that can happen. It's a variable or something. Let's really quickly check supplies in Constanza. They still seem okay. We are going to have to try and lift the siege there now, really, I think. There's pretty substantial Austrian forces there, as there are in Bucharest. Let's have a look. Hussein Avenue really is the kind of best bet for it. Riza Pasha's not activated in Varna. I'm going to think about that just for a moment. Now we have lifted the siege at Niš. It looks like the main Austrian force from Sarajevo has moved south now. We're going to have to stay on the defensive here for 2 reasons. One, Avdi Pasha doesn't have a cavalry division, and anyway, he's not activated. And if he's attacked in Niš, he gets the support of Omar Pasha. And whilst he's in Niš, he also supports Omar Pasha, which is crucial because we have a new Austrian commander. We've not seen him before. Field Marshal Tassilio von Fatestis de Tolna. I'm guessing it's probably Italian, I don't know. But yeah, but a new Austrian commander. I was thinking a moment ago we haven't seen Radetzky, but of course he's probably brown bread by now, isn't he? So he is no longer, which is no longer a foe, which is welcome, because he was a bit of a troubling kind of sight. Although we never ever engaged him in any major battles actually, and he was mostly a defensive commander anyway. But Yeah, so pretty quiet round. Now we have got a completed merchant fleet, which is now fully completed, and we're going to start looking at kind of expanding our maritime presence. I'm thinking probably Latin America, something like that. Mexico. Now, in the video that was lost, it was mentioned that the United States declared war on Mexico. They've intervened into Mexico. Don't know what they're looking to achieve. But this really, on the verge of what could be an American Civil War. The secessionist noises in the South. Be interesting to see what ramifications that has. Imagine a Mexico backing the Confederacy. All these areas controlled by the United States going to the Confederacy. I don't know. We're going to send a trade, a merchant fleet, I think, to the kind of Gulf of Mexico maritime box, looking at trade with Mexico. I think we're going to sink. They're going to be clippers. I thought I had them selected. I don't. Let's go back to Constantinople, and so it's the 9th Merchant Fleet. Partly because we're going to see if we can maybe trade with it. If there's a breakaway, if there ends up being a breakaway state in the southern states, trading with them could be interesting also. 23 days. So yeah, developing a commercial presence in the Americas. And the next one we're probably going to look at, I guess probably China. We're going to begin the construction of another one straight away now anyway, actually. One thing I should point out is this does put pressure on relations. And ironically, it's free trade powers like Britain that don't like it. Free trade powers love free trade whilst they're at the top, of course. They don't like competition. So yeah, that is a bit of a downside. But we're going to do it anyway because, we're not a colony. We have to kind of... we have to spread our wings a little bit within reason. And we have got good relations with Britain, so we can kind of trade on that a little bit. So that uses a bit of private capital, not too much manufactured goods. Okay, we've got the main fleet, Constantinople. So yeah, we're significantly expanding our kind of commercial maritime presence over the last year, and I think it's something that we need to do. We have got a pretty sizable kind of economy now, I'd say. May even be bigger than Austria's. But yeah, we need to kind of be able to... It's a thirsty economy. We do need raw materials. Now, one thing I should point out with regard to raw materials is that, we kind of retake a niche, and as we retake it, the rail line in niche is completed. That connects up two coal fields, and makes us pretty much self-sufficient in terms of coal. We lose 1 unit per turn, and in any case we have 2 coal mines being constructed, one in Kosovo nearing completion and one in Petrik. So we're basically a self-sufficient coal power now, which is really good to see. And that's no small thing because we have a fairly considerable industrial base now, so yeah, good stuff. Yeah, so no significant engagements. We succeeded in retreating battle in Albania. Yeah, this is a worry. This is the thing I didn't really want to happen, is the Austrians moving down on the left like this. Should have really fortified Albania, but anyway, too late. Yeah, nothing we could do in the west for the time being. It's just because of the size of Austrian forces still in place, in the north here. And it looks like they've received replacements enough as well. But they don't have the kind of massive reserves we've seen in the past. We definitely have taken a toll on them, I think. We really have. The configuration of our forces is such now that we have, we can still provide support, but it's not the kind of substantial support into one location that we had before. But we're still providing support. The units should be okay. Okay, what we are going to think about really quickly as well before I flick to economy is we've got artillery regiment with 2 battalions or 2 batteries per regiment. We've got a cavalry division being built. We're going to begin the construction of an additional artillery regiment. This time we're going to construct it in, we'll just construct it in Smyrna, I think. Good, and we're still kind of balanced positive in officers, which is good. Pasha's done, or Mehmed Pasha. But this guy, that's Hussein. There's too many Husseins and Mehmeds. Yeah, okay, so it could be this guy. Don't know what he was congratulated for, because he there were no actions, but it may be that he was able to kind of very effectively get reserves into place or something like that. Some sort of administrative feat. Economic crisis arrives in Hanover. Welcome to the club. Exports. Good enough. 530 plus 339. We're generating good money every turn, like really good money. Now we have an additional factory being constructed, don't we? A textile factory, which is in Ankara. Okay. Britain declined our state visit. France declined our state visit. China declined our state visit. Yeah, so Britain, recent construction of ships. Recent construction of ships. They just don't like it. It's just merchant ships, but yeah, we have to basically not construct anything militarily for a while before these powers. I suppose they're just alarmed, you know, at yeah, kind of large sort of maritime expansion programs. They are, I mean, you know, they are merchant ships, but nevertheless, they don't like it. Austrian national morale is at 131. And their army is still listed as sizable. Right, chief bribing. It's 40 state revenue. Let's try and look at just upping our colonial penetration a little bit, I think. So we've got 29 here, 28 here. Does cost a little bit, but we might be able to get this into a position where we can move for protectorate status. I mean, the Dutch will challenge that. It's a bit daft, because if they challenge it and put it off, we're not in any kind of position. You know, it's sort of bluff, really. There's nothing we can do about Sumatra if they want to fight for it. And if we end up getting in a kind of diplomatic crisis and it goes wrong, we lose all our colonial penetration pretty much, and they take it, which means they could move it to full colonial status ultimately very quickly. But if it comes off, it would pay, really pay. That's it pretty much. Got to put you on pause past turn to late October, and then we'll probably leave it in late October. I think, because I'm not sure how long this video is already. So yeah, see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back. It's late October then, and I think I'm going to try and squeeze another turn in. The reason being is things have become interesting enough that I want to make a bit of a move here and see how it kind of unfolds. Let's read through the report. So in terms of kind of flavour events and things like that, nothing too significant. We've got pirates down here in the kind of Indian Ocean. I'm wondering if we could, our forces, Yemeni pirates, thread shipping around here. So I think we're going to release the kind of Persian Gulf force then to deal with that. I think it's around here, isn't it? Yeah. Right, so counter-piracy operation. That's it. Belgium's at war again. Again, it looks like the Prussians have decided to kind of make a move on them again. Possibly, resulting in another war with France. We'll see what happens there, but that's interesting to see. Seeing really extensive railroad development now in Northern Europe, in Germany and France. Britain's already quite heavily covered in railroads at the beginning of this period, but. Now the other problem is, I'll go through the battles and what's kind of happened militarily, but the Austrians have hit our merchants quite hard in the western approaches. To that end, we are going to have to pull this merchant fleet temporarily, bring it back, probably bring it to Smyrna or maybe Constantinople, with a view to kind of get replacements sorted out. They can receive replacements at sea, but if they hit hard like that again, we might end up losing the kind of merchant fleet entirely. which we don't want to do. So we're going to pull our merchants from there for the time being. Now the Austrians conducted a pretty sizable offensive, well, an attempt to take Constanta. They assaulted the fortress. 2 national morale points from that. That's welcome. Yeah, the Austrian field command loses, what, 25,000 casualties? We lose about 18,000. The significance of it is, you know, it's the fortress is partially breached. They're not able to do it. And now the problem is, with these kind of fortress sort of garrisons, is they don't have very high organisation or morale. So it only takes really a few attempts. You have to kind of batter them a little bit, and eventually they'll start surrendering. They're still in reasonable shape, even though they have sustained losses. The Austrians make another assault. They lose 10,000 casualties, inflict 10,000 casualties. So they're making headway. But it means that Constanta's on the clock. We have 2 specially built, dedicated fortress divisions in that fortress, and we've invested a lot in upgrading it and getting it in quite good shape. It's one of our more formidable fortresses, even though it is a pre-industrial fortress. The reason being, of course, is because our plan for a war against Russia did kind of hinge on having a fairly powerful fortress here to buy time, to allow us to achieve force concentration and get our field command in place really in the Balkan Peninsula. So it was intended to hold for a long period of time. We don't want to lose those dedicated divisions. They can kind of replenish and reconstitute themselves, but it means that we are going to have to look to lift the siege. Now we're going to do a bit of a kind of curveball here, because the Austrians have concentrated a lot of forces now into Constanta. So we're going to conduct a bit of a kind of curveball offensive. 2 days for Hussein Avni, who is a fast mover. He's activated. His command is in very good shape indeed. Into Wallachia, and then 13 days to Constanta. It doesn't mean that we're going to be attacking them across the river. In addition to that, we are going to set Abdul Karim Nadir to an offensive posture. 2 days. Actually, you know what? Let's set him to assault. We're going to try and get him to assault Bucharest to secure the rear. Yeah, it's going to take him 2 days to do that. And he'll have the help of Hussein Avni clearing the area around Bucharest. Yeah. If it comes off, it could be interesting. I'm wondering whether we don't be too ambitious. Whether we just set him... Let's just set him to an offensive posture. Because it doesn't matter. As long as we hold the ground around the fort, that's fine. If this force then tries to fall back, which it might well do, we have a force in place. And Rita Pasha is not activated, but he provides support for Constanta. Upon the conclusion of this maneuver, we'll have to bring Rita Pasha up probably to Constanta, so he can provide support to Bucharest. Does leave Plevna momentarily vulnerable, but it's a fortress, we have a garrison that can be mustered there, and we have Austrian kind of free army corps being reconstructed here, almost at a division strength each at the moment. This one is Italian, by the looks of it. This is comprised of Italian prisoners of war that wish to offer us their service, and that's welcome. And the other, it looks like it's just a mixed ethnic force of Austrian POWs that are prepared to fight for us. So that's good, and that will bolster the position in Plevna. And in any case, we can always bring forces down to Plevna. Now we're going to, in addition to counterattacking on the right, we are now going to make a move on the left. We're going to keep Abdi Pasha in place. The reason being is he hasn't got a cavalry division and there's rail access to his force. And we want to bring a cavalry division via rail from Ankara when it's completed. And it's almost completed. So, we're going to throw a bit of another curveball here. The Austrians think that they've got a really good force here across the river. So I don't think they're going to attack this turn. Plus we have a fortress being constructed in Agosta. So, we are going to get Omar Pasha to move to Zvornik. 9-day march. He's set to offensive posture, all-out attack. He's supported by Abdi Pasha. The idea is to give them a bit of a bloody nose here, and maybe draw them into a bit of a fight where Omar Pasha is permanently based here, but has the support of another command. And that command could kind of move south, possibly. We might move to Kosovo, break off a force. Now, Albania is secure, but it looks like they've pressed an army call down to Larissa. These aren't fortified towns, but they have very small garrisons inside. These are basically the Bashi Bazuki irregulars when the war started, they made sure that they were all inside the towns. So that they can basically hold the town. If forces move through, they don't take the town, you know. This is a corps, so it's going to run out of supplies pretty quick, you know, unless it takes... There's no way an army corps can take Salonika on its own, for example. It looks like they move maybe another army corps into Montenegro or a division or something, but we're going to try and open up a fight now on the kind of western flank. So this is going to be an aggressive counterstroke. It's going to be touch and go, but we do have, you know, substantial forces. 13-day march for Hussein Avni ain't great, because it means he's going to get there, you know, the end, really, of the fortnight period, having marched constantly and engaged in an action. But the idea is he will receive the support of both Abdul Karim and Reza Pasha. I think he can do it. I think it's doable. Yeah, we're going to do it. I mean, we can bring about 300,000 just under men to bear on this counter attack, and yeah, it leaves this force in a dangerous position. It has to retreat back into an area that will be held by a senior commander in command of a proper field command of 90,000 men set to an offensive posture. So that could get really messy for them. Could get messy. It's not 20th century warfare. You know, they're not like continuous front lines really. They're a little bit porous. The more forces that we have, the less porous that they are. But yeah, it could be really tricky. Best case scenario, this force falls back, it goes into the fortress. We besiege it in the fortress. That would be really good. Of course, we don't know what they got in Kronstadt. They got what looks like an army corps plus a supply train reserve force in Moldova. But could get interesting. This could get interesting. We'll see what happens. And yet, counter-offensive using our best general in the west against Zvornik. We have a garrison force in Zvornik. It's not very big. The structure's totally breached. There's a good chance it may even fall before Omar Pasha gets there. We'll see what happens. Anyway, that's going to be pretty much our moves. Artillery regiment almost complete. Okay, let's use riverine movements and get that force to join up with Reza Pasha. What we are going to do, I think, is begin to... No, we'll continue building artillery for now. At some point, we could actually build artillery and fortress troops this turn. Yeah, we're going to do that. So let's construct another artillery force. And we're going to construct a fortress garrison, which we're going to send probably to Salonika. Or maybe Belgrade. Because things are getting a little bit dicey on the left, so we need to take some kind of precautions. That leaves us with 7 officers. That's good. Now we have had a revolt in the Persian Gulf states, but this area is so sparsely populated that it's... I can't see where the report is now. It's basically instantly crushed. With the exception of Oman, this is a separate kind of principality. Or Khedive or something, but yeah, it's rebels have kind of made some headways there. We need to keep an eye on that. We do have colonial fortresses here, and we do have a marine division that we can release if need be in the Persian Gulf to kind of provide some security for this region. Okay, let's check the economy. Looks like we're quite around in exports. Domestic market sales slightly down. Businessmen from Austria outraged at being taxed heavily by Piedmont Sardinia. It's a kind of running sore between these two powers. Might be providing the kind of basis for like maybe another war, Risorgimento war or something. Can't see Piedmont Sardinia doing it. I mean, they got such a drubbing last turn. Do they even have much of a field command? I don't know. Yeah, shame though. That's right. It's because there are Austrian Austrian concessions inside Piedmont Sardinia. That's something we could look at actually. I've been thinking of looking at that with Greece. Fish, cotton. fruits. Yeah, they've already got a prime plantation, that's a shame. Okay, an okay-ish round economically. No major concerns, nothing to worry about. Let's check our trade balance. It's the lowest I've seen cereals in a long time. We're selling a lot of cereals. 10 units per turn. Plus, I guess we have conversion on, which we'll probably have to turn off at some point soon. Let's just check steel really quickly. Yeah, we'll leave steel buffer to stockpile for the time being. So we actually have conversion off. Now we have conversion on. We're breaking even on cereals if everything sells this turn, that's okay. Yeah, cereals and national market sales are quite high now. 17 plus 4 conversion. Craftsman production at 14. Structures production at 17. Okay. The economy's in a reasonable shape. Obviously, inflation's higher than we'd like it to be. But no major anxieties. We're meeting all kinds of demand that we need to be meeting. Let's check our regional census to make sure there's no kind of civil disorder problems. We are in the midst of a crisis after all. No, nothing. I mean, everything seems to be okay. For the most part, the population is either kind of indifferent or reasonably content, it seems. We're beginning to reduce militancy a little bit. Okay, that's the report then. The Abu Dhabian tribal revolt was crushed. The population is so sparse here. These colonial forts are able to just suppress the rebellion quite readily, which is good. The Dutch aren't playing anything in Sumatra. I think that's pretty much it for this turn. So we'll pass turn just because we've got a pretty hectic kind of... we're going to be launching a bit of a counter-strike really on the Danube, or south of the Danube, and maybe even bringing the war to them, sort of thing. Yeah, plus we're going to be looking at an attack in Zvornik, so we're kind of, attacking on both flanks. So yeah, the counter-attack begins really with attrition the Austrians as much as we can. We must have inflicted, God, 300,000-400,000 casualties on them. We did see, like precipitous collapses of Austrian commands with lots of prisoners and stuff like that. Okay, that was a month ago or so, and they've failed to take Constanta. My feeling also is that Austrian forces are funneling around here. They're seeing an open area, and we're seeing reserve army corps kind of, appear. Because of our high level of loyalty in Bosnia, we get good reconnaissance on forces. And yeah, we're just seeing a trickling of forces. So I think the Austrians are beginning to concentrate more in the west, because they're not making any headway here. And there is an open area. They've taken Sarajevo. They've got a large command in Zvornik, which is a stone's throw from Sofia. So that's my feeling. So to that end, putting a bit of pressure here, we draw some forces away from the west. And if we take Bucharest, which is a victory location, and hold it, that could be interesting. That could be interesting. So, we're going to try and do that. Long term, that would provide us with a constant trickle of kind of prestige and maybe allow us to kind of press for a white peace, which, to tell you the truth, given the scale of this war, I mean, it'd be lovely to indulge in ideas of taking Vienna again and doing kind of breaking apart the Austrian Empire, but they are more powerful than they were, you know. So we have to think a bit carefully about what we do here, you know. We'll see what happens, you know. We'll see. If we manage to destroy a large part of the Austrian army, then, you know, who knows? Anything will be on the cards. But our past turn, we're in late October, so I'll see you in early November. Okay, welcome back then. It's early November, and let's have a look at what's kind of happened, and we'll probably end the video here, because I can't fathom how long it is, but it's probably long. So the first battle then is an Austrian attempt to take Constanta. It's an assault on the fortress. We get a national morale point for it. We inflict 20,000 casualties, take 28,000. And yeah, the garrison is being whittled down. But we inflict sufficient casualties so we get a national morale point. There's a second Austrian attempt, this time more successful. We can see now they're starting to get prisoners. The position's starting to collapse. There's only 44,000 left. We take 20,000 casualties out of that, only inflict 4,000 casualties. So we can see that really after a few days, successive Austrian assaults on Constanta are beginning to pay off. Now, this is when Hussein Avni manages to, by about this time, he's in, along with Adi Pasha, he's in Bucharest. It's a pretty sizable engagement. We get one national morale point. We inflict 13,000 casualties. Take 7,400 prisoners. We destroy about a division's worth of elements. Successful. Good to see. But then, I think we're seeing really the last assault, the final assault. They take a lot of prisoners. 20,000 prisoners. Inflict 20,000 casualties. And that's it. Game up for Constanta. The fortress falls. We're going to this last... We've got about 200,000 troops there. All of which have sustained fairly hefty losses by now. But yeah, they've got substantial forces there. There's an additional engagement in Bucharest where it looks like the Austrians are starting to press forces into Bucharest. Presumably not imagining that we had our own forces there. So they're just moving forces into Bucharest. We destroyed 2 elements, inflict 20,000 casualties, take 3,000 prisoners, only lose 2,000 ourselves. And I gather it's a part of this force of von Rimpfen, who was in the west. So that's interesting. There's another big battle outside Bucharest where the main Austrian force moves in to Bucharest. And they actually outnumber us here. They have a force of 236,000. We have 180,000. We have about the same amount of guns. We inflict nearly 60,000 casualties, just under. Destroy 2 elements, take 3,000 prisoners, lose 20,000. Big engagement, and yeah, that's under the command of Abdul Karim Nadir, and that's very good to see. And this is actually, there's the fort at Constanta obviously hadn't quite fallen. This must have been the last engagement. By now they're just taking huge numbers of prisoners, you know. They just can't hold out any longer. They've been battered to pieces. And that's it. Now Omar Pasha, day 10 or day 8, he arrives early, is in Zvornik. He engages the Austrian army under von Ostrich of 80,000. With the support of Abdi, he outnumbers them heavily, inflicts 20,000 casualties, takes under 8,000, 7,600. And yeah, nice victory in the bag. So that's that battle. There's quite a lot of engagements. Anti-piracy engagement was a success. We sink all of the ships, don't take any losses. That's a nice bit of experience for Mushavir. And clears the area around the Arabian Peninsula. There's an additional engagement at Zvornik. I think a similar thing here. It looks like a large Austrian force is attempting to move in to reinforce the siege. There is still an Austrian force here, 2 army corps heavily mauled, and remnants of mauled army corps up here, but they've still got large forces in the west. So there's an additional battle. We actually inflict really heavy casualties here. You know, 56,000 casualties, but it's not cheap. We take it for 25,000 casualties. And that's a significant engagement. Austrian force, there's sort of force parity here. But bear in mind, Omar Pasha's force, half of it is Abdi Pasha in support. But yeah, I mean, it's ultimately successful, but no national morale points. It's a costly-ish victory, by comparisons to other victories anyway. What looks like mopping up, really, of that force. The Austrian force has been thrown back, or part of it has, but there's still Austrian forces there. They take 15,000 casualties, we lose 2,300. So ultimately our operations are successful, especially in the west. That would be expected, I suppose, with Mushiroma Pasha. It's a bit messier in the east. Hussein Avni never gets to really press on into Constanza to lift the siege. That's a shame. But the battles around Bucharest are sort of ferocious enough that they just stall him there, basically. We capture a supply convoy. We'll add that to Hussein Avni's force, I think. What do we do here? I think it's going to require a bit of thinking about. The tricky thing here is we don't have Rita Pasha. He's not able to support these boys in Bucharest. And Plevna's kind of open, although we have these kind of reserve, these Austrian kind of, so these free army corps, if you like, of Italians, mixed Italians, Hungarians and Croats. They're a division each now in Plevna, plus whatever kind of force the garrison musters. So an attempted Austrian move here is likely to fail. But, yeah, what do we do from here? Constanza fell. The substantial Austrian forces, although they have taken losses. So large Austrian force, probably 200,000 there, I reckon. My thinking is they're going to try and come back to secure Bucharest. That's what I think is honestly going to happen. How's Rita Pasha? He's 4 days march, but he kind of has to stay really here because these guns are going to kind of be joining his force. They left late. They're delayed. I don't know. We just move the guns maybe into sort of Constantinople or something. Just land them somewhere else. Try and get Rita Pasha into Plevna. That means he can offer support to Bucharest. Bucharest can offer support to him. That leaves the right flank open though along Varna. So yeah. And the Austrian force here is large enough. They might try multi sort of pronged offensives. I don't know. That's the action anyway. That's pretty much it. So the counterattack has kind of been successful. We obviously don't take Bucharest, but we are besieging it. The substantial Austrian force is there. Reserve army corps, forces that have been damaged in battle, combined really with the fortress garrison. The longer we hold this, the better. If we can hold this position, it'd be very good indeed. And yeah, basically siege this fortress out, and there'll be a big blow to the Austrians. Let's see what Austrian national morale is at. 125, we're at 116. We're closing the gap. You know, we're inflicting a toll. They're also their manpower strength is down to 175. Their combat value. So they've got an army about just over 3 times larger than ours. But that's based on raw combat value. But we're starting to see, some results now. Another very bloody round. But yeah, the counter-attack has come off. We attritioned them sufficiently. We've conducted a counter-offensive. And we captured supply wagons. And yeah, what we do from here, I don't know. I'm going to have a day or two to think about this. And yeah, think about what to do. Hopefully this video won't crash. I'll leave it uploading now. And yeah, we'll pick up in early November, I think. We'll pick up where we left off. Because I've not, I don't know where to go from here quite yet. So thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.